So I was starting to kind of come into the idea of like, I think this is possible. Like, is this what God wants me to do?
I was terrified of any public speaking, that being my initial hurdle that God helped me overcome with some tough love, reminding me as he reminded Moses, who gave you a mouth?
And we had this plan that we were both going to play cricket for Australia, and then when we retired, we were going to become pastors.
And it sounds so uninspiring, but I think that's the way God works in people's lives. He doesn't always work in big thunderclaps or life-revealing moments. Sometimes it's just like, well, there's the door, it's open, that's the one you should take.
The ministry seemed like something that I could fit into. Again, was that just naivety? I don't know. I look back thinking, was that a blessing? That as a young person, I wasn't overthinking it. I couldn't overthink it.
It was frightening, and we didn't want to say yes, but we were afraid to say no. And luckily, we're such a clever people. So we came up with this great, clever solution. So we said yes, but not now.
In 1 Timothy 3, St. Paul writes, "If any man aspires to the office of overseer, he desires a noble task. There are many men who have sought to enter the office of Word and Sacrament that Christ established for the sake of his church. Christ gave us pastors. So how does he call men into this noble task?" In this episode, we will hear from 6 Lutheran pastors as they share how God called them into the holy ministry and the various means, both remarkable and ordinary, that God used to guide them into his service.
Looking back, I was young and I didn't wrestle with the idea, but that in itself has led me to be in this position where God can use me as he wills.
Welcome to a very special episode of Here She Stands. If this is your first time listening, my name is Lexi. I live in Tasmania. I am a homeschooling mum and I am married to a pastoral student. And my co-host is Sonia. So welcome, Sonia.
Hello, thank you. Good to be here. I'm also a homeschooling mum and the wife of a pastor whom you will hear from later in this episode.
This episode has been months in the making, and it's an absolute joy to be able to finally release it today.
To be fair, we did have Lent in there, so that is the busiest time of year for pastors, so it's okay that they didn't have time during that time to record.
Yes, I had the bright idea of doing this episode just before Lent started. This episode is all about pastors and how they discerned the call to the office of the ministry. It features 6 pastors, 3 Australians, 2 Canadians, and 1 Latvian. 4 of these pastors are in Canada, so only 2 of them are currently in Australia.
But we do want them back. You're welcome back in Australia if you're listening.
There were so many pastors that I wanted to ask, but there's only so many you can do in a single episode.
If you want to hear more of this sort of thing, let us know. I thought that this was a great idea for a special episode. What gave you the idea? What sort of sparked this?
To be honest, the number one reason was for my own personal benefit, really. And I'm not quite sure if that's the right way to think about it. I guess over the last year, with the difficulties that Tasman and I have had when it comes to him studying to be a pastor, when things are tough, it can be easy to question whether you are making the right decision or whether you are on the right track. I found myself asking, okay, Tasman has received a call from the church to study to be a pastor. How do we discern this? How do I discern this as his wife? How do I know that this is something that we really should be pursuing? Like, how do we know? So I wanted to hear from other pastors just for encouragement, because it can be very easy to be discouraged when things are tough.
Yeah.
Because I want to be supportive of my husband. I want to be his helpmeet and walk alongside him. I want to bring him good and not harm. And I was struggling with some of the doubts and some of the questions that were coming up in my mind in regards to him studying to be a pastor. I just wanted to hear from other pastors to see what their experiences were. Every pastor that is featured in this episode has said something that has really encouraged me and really convicted me. I'm very thankful that we've done this episode, and I'm very thankful for the pastors that have participated. The second reason why I thought this episode would be beneficial is I have noticed that pastors are often misunderstood. And I think that as women in the church, there are things that we can do to understand our pastors better, to understand their vocation, their call, what their role is. I thought that this episode might be just a nice way to do that, to help our listeners understand pastors and their callings more deeply.
Yeah, I love that. It's God's call on their life and the church's call on their life, not their own personal decision or desire that's brought them to where they are now.
Yes.
That's something
Yes.
that I struggled with the 5 years that we were at ALC. I don't think Lee mentioned it in his interview, but the entire 5 years, I would always say, when you become a pastor and when this and when that. And he would always say, if. Until
Yeah.
the day that I'm ordained, it's if. I don't know if I will become a pastor yet. He felt the call, but that call wasn't fully confirmed until the bishops said yes, and the church said yes, and the lecturers said yes, and he was ordained, and then it was a when. Then it was, yep, you're ordained now. But before that, it was always an if, and I really found that hard because it's like, well, we're doing this for 5 years. We've placed our whole life on hold for this and given up everything else basically for this. So
Yes.
if not this, then what? But he
Yes.
was like, well, that's up to God. But right now it's if. I guess you're still in that if stage,
Yes.
and that's a very tricky stage to be in.
It is very tricky, especially if you are making big sacrifices, and it's tough at times.
We can call this your own personal research project that's for the benefit of everyone.
Tasman actually said to me, is the podcast becoming your own personal like research for your
Yeah.
own personal benefit,
No,
like
I
self-help
think-
for you, Lexi?
It just so happens that we have a platform.
Yes.
I think it's great. And I love how much the pastors really opened up and, really took
Yes.
it seriously, which was just so lovely of them.
Would you actually like to read out the questions that we sent to the pastors? I think that would be very helpful to give everyone the heads up.
I can do that. I thought they were good. Question number 1 is, when did you first have the desire to the office of the ministry? Was being a pastor your first choice, or did you want to pursue a different career path? And then question 2, did you wrestle with the idea of becoming a pastor? If so, what thoughts and challenges did you wrestle with? And then question 3, how did you discern whether you should pursue seminary training in order to become a pastor?
Now, some of the pastors we interviewed, and some of them simply just sent in their recordings. They recorded their answers at home and then just sent them in to us. Because this is one of our longer episodes, I thought it would be nice to add in some music in between the interviews. Enoch Fandrick kindly recorded and sent us some of his organ music to use in this episode. For those of you who don't know Enoch Fandrick, he is a respected and esteemed Australian organist. He is 22 years old and he currently plays the organ at St. John's Anglican Church and St. Michael's Cathedral in Wagga Wagga. He is a parishioner of Lake Hume Lutheran Mission, which meets in Barnawartha in Victoria. And yes, I did have to find a tourist video on YouTube to try and figure out how to say that name. He's in his final year of studying medicine. and he enjoys studying the organ, sacred music, and the church liturgy. He shares his organ playing and experiences on social media. You can find him on YouTube and Facebook, just under his name, Enoch Vandrick. He shares videos of himself practicing and preparing for services, and also videos of himself visiting different organs across Australia. He's definitely someone that is worth following and worth listening to. So, Enoch, thank you so much for the time and effort that you have put into recording music for us. God bless you. Let's jump into our interviews. Our first guest pastor is Pastor Peter Noble from Christ Evangelical Lutheran Church in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Now, Pastor Noble is not a Canadian. He is an Australian, and he only moved to Canada in the middle of 2025. Pastor Noble studied at the Australian Lutheran College in Adelaide and was ordained in 2019. In his spare time, he is a musician. He writes and records his own music. Plus, he also does covers where he will take a popular song and then he will change the lyrics, giving them a Lutheran twist. If you want to listen to his music, all you need to do is go to one of the popular online platforms such as Spotify, YouTube, or iTunes and search Noby One. Pastor Noble is married to Altamira and they have 4 children. And if you would like to hear more about their story of moving to Canada, I did an interview with Altamira late last year in our episode called Faith and Moving Abroad. Pastor Noble was kind enough to record his answers at home and send them in to us. So thank you, Pastor, for participating in today's episode.
Welcome to the Here She Stands podcast. I'm your irregular host, Peter Noble, Pastor Peter Noble from Lutheran Church of Canada. And here we go. So these are the questions that Alex has sent me. Thanks, Alex, for having me on here. You're welcome, Peter. Number 1, when did you first feel drawn to the office of the ministry? Was it your first choice, or did you want to pursue a different career path? That's a good question. When did I first feel drawn? I probably have to take you back and tell you a bit more about my life. And that is that I didn't grow up a Lutheran. I grew up in the Pentecostal church. Grew up in a Pentecostal home for the first 20 years. For about a year or 2 there, I left the church and then came back to the church by God's mercy. When I came back to the church at about age 19, never did I ever think that I would ever become a pastor. It was the last thing on my mind. I remember looking at pastors, at least from the Pentecostal church perspective, and I thought, these guys are superhuman beings. They have the ability to deal with spiritual matters. They are way up there with God. They know what they're talking about, and what they say is gospel, or what they say is the law. So I had a lot of respect for people who were pastors. Probably a little bit of a standoffish culture that I probably grew up in. Like, you don't just approach a pastor. They're almost like too good to talk to you. That was just me growing up as a Pentecostal. But as I grew older, probably age 22, I joined the military. I got married. And then for 5 years, was doing a lot of evangelism in the army. I really was challenged by questions that people had theologically. Naturally, I went away, and I didn't know it then, but I started looking into what's called apologetics. Because of that, I started growing in my faith, started knowing how to defend the faith and actually give an account, a rational, reasonable, logical account for my faith. After about 4 or 5 years, I left the army and I went to study at an Anglican college. And I was thinking of pursuing ministry. I had done evangelism for maybe 5, 6, 7 years in doing hip hop music with my wife. And it was at this time that I felt drawn to ministry in general, but not formal ordained ministry. The point I'm making here is that being drawn to the ministry, it was a very slow process. It started by dipping my toes in evangelism, doing that for a good 8 to 10 years, like cutting my teeth, learning how to share the gospel on the street, doing hip-hop ministry in schools, in churches, youth ministries. Then I went to study ministry formally, not intentionally with the desire to go into the office of the ministry, but I was discerning that for about 3 years while I was doing my undergraduate at Ridley College in Melbourne. So I was thinking of ordination, thinking of ministry long-term, starting to kind of come into the idea of like, I think this is possible. Like, is this what God wants me to do? And I really struggled because the Melbourne Diocese, the Anglican Church, the Melbourne Diocese ordains women, which is a whole other discussion. And for me, that really pressed on my conscience. And so I did not pursue ordination in the Anglican Church proper in Melbourne. I did work for a little bit. I worked as a youth minister, formally as a licensed lay youth minister in the Melbourne Diocese in Berwick Anglican Church for about a year. And by the end of my time there, I had finished my degree. My last 6 months as a youth minister there was kind of the pivotal moment. I saw an ad on Facebook. It said, "Are you called to be a Lutheran pastor?" And it was an ad run by the Australian Lutheran College at the time. And I said to myself, yes, yes, I am. And I had been reading so much about Lutheran theology. I had been looking at baptism, the sacraments, Holy Communion. And for me, being drawn to ministry, it was like, I can't go into ministry unless I'm confident in what I believe about these things. And I think for me, I was just wrestling with baptism, Holy Communion. Holy Communion, is the real presence there? Is Christ there? How is he there? Tell me more about that. And I'm just reading. I was reading Hermann Zusser, This Is My Body. I was reading Luther's Small Catechism. I started getting into the Book of Concord. I'm reading books by Matt Harrison. I ended up buying a library from a guy who was a Lutheran academic at the time. I read all these books and I was like just drawn into the Lutheran faith because the Book of Concord was answering all my questions. And just one after another, I just started to go, yes, I actually believe this. And it got to a point where I was like, I knew that I was called to go study again. I'm like, yes, I actually need to go back to the seminary and actually do more time. I basically called the seminary up and they said, it was Dr. Pfeiffer, and he was like, well, are you a Lutheran? And I remember saying to him, not yet, I'm not. And he said, well, why don't you join the Lutheran Church? Give me a call in a year. And I pretty much didn't take no for an answer. I just said, no, I work as an Anglican youth minister full time. I can't just leave my employment, but I'm willing to go to seminary. Here's what I have. I have a Bachelor of Theology. I've read these books and I just rattled them off. I had them there all up on the bookshelf. There must have been, I think I bought 2,000 books for $2,000 from Brett Mullen. Anyway, he just said to me, it sounds like you're a lot further along than most people. I'll get you an interview. That's all I can do. And then the bishop has to approve you. Sure enough, I got approved and I went to the seminary. My whole attitude towards the office of the ministry was, I believe that I'm called, but I need to just submit to the church. I think it was refining what it meant to be called. And so when you go to the seminary and when you look at the scriptures and you learn about what it means to discern your calling, you really look at these two things. You look at the inward call and the outer call. The inward call is subjective. You believe that you're called, but the outward call is the objective call. And that comes from the church. And so the scriptures say in 1 Timothy 3, it says, let them first be tested. And then if there's nothing found against them, it's talking about deacons and overseers, it says, then let them serve. So I had come to a point where I thought, I'm going to allow myself to be tested. I'm going to allow myself to go through the crucible and say, Lord, I'm going to lay my life down on the altar here as a living sacrifice. And if I'm not called, then I'm not. And I kind of went in with that attitude. And by God's grace, at the end of my 3 years, they said, yes, we do believe that you're called. But it wasn't without its challenges, both for me personally, because just because you think you're called doesn't mean you are. And just because you can do academics doesn't mean that makes you a good pastor. So there's a whole bunch of things. I could probably talk a bit more about that, but I might just answer your next question. Number 2, did you wrestle with the idea of becoming a pastor? If so, what thoughts and challenges did you wrestle with? Yes, I wrestled. What wrestles did I have? Not being qualified. Even though I would consider myself a very confident person, a very confident young man, gifted in music and all these things, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're always going to have weaknesses, you're going to have growth areas. I discovered very quickly when I came to the Lutheran seminary at ALC that I had to become more self-aware of how I project myself onto others. I'm physically large. I'm a large man. I'm very tall. I'm a bit over, I think, 6 foot. And if I start talking aggressively, I can come across very threatening to a lot of people. So I need to be self-aware of how I'm projected onto others. So I need to be cautious about how I'm perceived. And so becoming self-aware and aware of how you're perceived and project the image that you project as a pastor to others and how they receive you is something that you need to always keep in the back of your mind. That's something that I needed to work on a lot. and I really wrestled with, and I probably got some extra help. Dr. Peach recommended, he said, I recommend you get some extra help going to I think it was a counselor. And he said, I want you to go there and I want you to ask him to help you reflect on these areas. And it was areas of like self-reflection, how you're perceived by others, maybe a little bit of conflict resolution as well. And I really kind of jumped into it going, if this is what I need to do to grow, I'm going to do it. I'm just going to submit to the process. So I remember very early on, I had basically made a promise to Jesus and said, Jesus, I'm going to submit to this process. Doesn't matter how long it takes. I think one time Dr. Peach did say to me, if the church believes that you need another year, are you happy to stay here for another year? And I said, I would stay here for 10 years until I'm ready. I don't care how long it takes. I'm going to submit to the process. Like God had rounded me out through this process, but it's challenging because you're wrestling with yourself. You're wrestling with the inadequacy of who you are as a person. You're wrestling with your own sin, and that's important where confession and absolution come in, to going to your own local pastor and confessing your sin and saying, Lord, have mercy on me. Please use me as a vessel for your mercy. And so confession and absolution is important, having your local pastor, worshiping locally. Thank God I was assigned to Glenelg Lutheran Church. I was under the direction of Pastor Timothy Ebbs, who was my local pastor there. And I spent a lot of time with him, just talking and working things through. So I learned a lot from him and from his wife, Jessica. I'm very blessed to have known them. And also just coincidentally, Lex will know that they share a very deep friend in the Lutheran faith, and that is Reverend Dr. John Kleinig, who was a member of Glenelg at the time there. And he also was a very godly mentor. He gave Altamira, my wife, and I, he gave us a lot of his time, both he and Claire. Very encouraging, very godly, down to earth. We'll get alongside you. Nothing's too important. He's there. His heart is to serve you and to equip you. Yeah, working through inadequacies, working through theological problems, and you're studying. But I think, there's so many things. Working out what your strengths are and your weaknesses are as a pastor, you have to work through those and intentionally be focusing on how to grow your weaknesses. Anyway, it can be really hard and there's challenges and we wrestle with it. And I think time is another thing that rounds us out, keeping us patient and grounded, trusting that God has got it, like that he knows. Like my pathway to the ordained ministry was a bit left, right, up, down, inside out. But I finally came through at the end. But it's frustrating and it's a wrestling thing. But I think the time thing is so important. It rounds us out so that we are prepared. God's timing is perfect. It's never rushed. It's never early. It's never late. It's perfect. And that's easier said than done. Amen. Last question. How did you navigate this call and whether you should pursue it? Well, I talked to my wife first. I said, Altamira, what do you think? And she was like, it's hard, right? Because she followed me from the military to Melbourne, from Sydney to Melbourne, and we were in Ridley for 3 years. We lived in a little shoebox of an apartment, and I did my degree. And by that time, we had Passion at first, then we had Alex, and then we had August by the time I had left to go to the seminary. So I came in at the Lutheran seminary with 3 children, and it was hard. I think having your wife and your family on board is so important. For me, my wife and my children are my first call. They're not a call somewhere after being a pastor. No. Like if I had to make a choice tomorrow between my wife and my children, whether I was going to serve them or serve the church, I would resign tomorrow because my wife and my children are my first call. I am a Christian, a baptized Christian before I am a husband. I'm a husband before I am a father. I'm a father before I am a pastor. And then I'm a whatever else after that. How did I navigate the call? Talking to my wife, talking to my children, bringing my children on the journey, telling them what we're doing. Hey, we're going to here to study because I'm testing my calling to be a pastor. What do you think about that, children? They are part of the package. They are my first flock. I'm proclaiming the gospel to them. There's days when I fail at that, and there's days when my flesh is tired and I don't want to do it, and I'm frustrated and I've got other things on my plate, but I purposely and intentionally every day need to constantly fight against my flesh and my own selfishness and serve my children and bring them on the journey. That doesn't stop even once you're ordained. Once you're ordained, it continues on, that you live this lifestyle of the gospel, a lifestyle of serving your wife, serving your children. That they need to know that I'm going to be there. Navigating that call and pursuing it is about managing your station and vocation, not forgetting where you are in your station and vocation. The Holy Spirit calls you to it. And I think if he calls you to it, he's going to pull you through it in terms of your study, in terms of knowing what gifts you have. The biggest challenge of navigating it is saying yes to the call and saying, we're going to submit our lives. And if you want to be a pastor, you need to, it's like being a Christian all over again. You have to give up everything to follow Christ. But if you want to be a pastor, it's like being the Christian of Christians. You need to actually meet the characteristics of 1 Timothy 3. You need to be slow to speak, gentle, not to be a lover of money, but you need to be a good manager of your own household. Now, these things are really hard. They're very convicting. I was very convicted when I read that because I felt so inadequate, because I'm like, man, I fail at this all the time. But just because you fail in it doesn't mean that you can't submit to the call that God wants you to pursue. But there is an element between where human striving ends and God's Spirit begins. There is a point where human exertion stops and God's Holy Spirit picks up, and you get to a point where you're like, I can't do any more. I'm doing everything I can and I'm leaning into my weaknesses, and I need God to do the rest. It sounds really cliche. It sounds very Pentecostal, but it's true. And so Paul talks about it that, Christ crucified is the power of God, that it pleases God to use the foolishness of preaching to bring people to salvation. So there is something about weakness that God uses as strength. And so I encourage anyone who is thinking of pursuing ordained ministry, if you think that you're called, just submit your life to the process. Go to seminary, submit your life, lay it down on the altar and say, here I am, Lord, I'm ready to do it.
The next pastor we've interviewed is Pastor Lee Van Rossen. He's currently serving at Christ the Redeemer Lutheran Mission in Callington in South Australia. He studied at the Australian Lutheran College and was ordained at the end of 2019. He's married to myself. We have 3 children and 1 on the way, and he was interviewed by myself. It's a short but very impactful interview. When did you first have the desire to the office of the ministry? Was being a pastor your first choice, or did you want to pursue a different career path?
Being a pastor was definitely not my first choice. In fact, many who knew me at the time I first started study would have heard me say, I'll never be a pastor. I was wanting to pursue a career in the police force, and especially not for chasing bad guys, but the thought of being able to be there for people in a crisis. I started study at ALC, and I think it was partway through either my first or second year, just as a theological student, I started to see how the pastoral students, what they were talking about as they were preparing to be pastors, matched everything that I wanted out of being a police officer. Everything of being there for people in a crisis, but with the added incredible bonus of being able to talk about your faith in the midst of it. So I'm not sure if that's where a desire started, but it definitely is where the office of the ministry started appealing to me as what I had always really hoped and wanted to be.
Did you wrestle with the idea of becoming a pastor? If so, what thoughts and challenges did you wrestle with?
I feel like I wrestled quite heavily. At first, my main issue was the thought of public speaking. I was terrified of any public speaking. that being my initial hurdle that God helped me overcome with some tough love, reminding me as he reminded Moses, who gave you a mouth? As I got to a point of surrendering that to God and offering to him that if he wants me to be a pastor, then fine. The next challenge was starting to recognize my deep inadequacy for being a pastor. And I'd say I still wrestle with, with that issue, completely having to be reliant on how Christ is sufficient and he uses me. I still wrestle with the idea of being a pastor because I am a broken, sinful man.
How did you discern whether you should pursue seminary training in order to become a pastor?
I think it was fairly easy for me as I was already in my second year of study at ALC as that theological student. So I started asking questions of those who were mentors to me. For me, I was blessed to have the seminary lecturers as mentors that could help encourage and guide me. But that really was step one. A large part of it was seeking out those Christian mentors that I already had and asking their advice of whether to proceed.
The following interview is with Pastor Joshua Pfeiffer. He's married to Kimberly, our blog manager, and they have 4 children. He studied at Australian Lutheran College and was ordained in 2010. He is currently serving at Tarrington Lutheran Parish in Victoria. He's also the author of Lift Your Eyes, How to Live Outside Yourself, published in mid-May by Concordia Publishing House. And he was also interviewed by myself. So, Pastor Joshua, when did you first have the desire to the office of the ministry? Was being a pastor your first choice, or did you want to pursue a different career path?
So I don't know exactly how old I was, but I'm going to guess around 12. I remember I had a friend whose both of our fathers were pastors. And so we had seen, this obviously modeled to us. And so I remember, but we were both sports mad and particularly obsessed with cricket. And so I remember I reckon about 12. I remember where we were talking about this, and we had this plan that we were both going to play cricket for Australia. And then when we retired, we were going to become pastors. So I think that's some kind of desire manifesting towards the office of the ministry. But also we had our priorities at that stage in life were very much with cricket rather than pastor first. So I don't know how serious that was. In hindsight, it was seemingly God planting the seeds. But yeah, fairly young, I guess.
Did you wrestle with the idea of becoming a pastor? If so, what thoughts and challenges did you wrestle with?
Yes. So when it became much more serious for me was many years later, perhaps towards the end of high school and shortly after that. And yes, I wrestled very much with it. I had other ideas. I had done all of my Year 12 subjects towards the goal of becoming a fighter pilot in the Air Force by that stage. So I'd realized I wasn't good enough to play cricket for Australia or anything else like that. But I also started to sense this strong desire to do what pastors do, to preach and teach the word of God and to be with people in their Christian journey through life. And I wrestled with that mainly, I think, because I just sort of sensed that it would define your life in a particular way. It felt like not just something that, you can choose to become a lawyer or become a carpenter and maybe sort of live a particular type of life, doing one job or another, one career or another. But I kind of sensed that if you do this, you're all in and it defines your whole life. And I knew I wanted to get married as well. I had, a relatively serious relationship around that time. Yeah, and I was also just wrestling with, okay, well, this, it impacts not just you, but God willing, you're the wife that He will give you and your children and all of that. And so just the gravity of it was with me in that time. And I mentioned that my father was a pastor, and that has had positives and negatives in terms of that process. So you saw a lot of the good things, the joys of it, but also the struggles. And so that was part of the wrestle as well.
And how did you discern whether you should pursue seminary training in order to become a pastor?
So I talked to lots of people, and it was a very important exercise in my life as a Christian in general of how God gives us Christian brothers and sisters around us for a reason. They're important to us to speak with, to listen to. And so I spoke to a lot of people and I tried to listen to, what I was hearing there. Yeah, and it was interesting because it involved people even who were not necessarily living an active Christian life. And in some cases, even they encouraged me in this path. People that I knew well, people that I didn't know so well. Yeah, a lot of that, a lot of prayer and reflection on what it would all mean. Probably the big thing for me where it kind of fell into place was actually where I kind of relaxed about it all a bit. And that was when somebody said that you don't, I'm probably overthinking it in a sense because it's not really up to me to discern whether I become a pastor or not. I'm just trying to work out in the first place whether to go and study, whether to become a student of theology. And then this person said, is a bit of a mentor figure for me, said, the church will decide whether you are called to be a pastor or not. And that was pivotal for me in many ways because it freed me to embrace the vocation of a student of theology and think, well, we'll just see where that leads. And it also helped to begin to teach me that it's not all about this inner sense of call, even though that's important, but ultimately it's about the external call of God through the church that's most important. And I can have a desire to be a pastor all I want, but if the church ends up saying, no, we don't think it's for you, then that's it. And on the other hand, even if I'm uncertain about this in myself, then that external call through the church is finally what's most important. So yeah, so that was really good advice. Just embrace the call to study in the first place and to learn and to grow and worry about the potential call to be a pastor if and when that comes in the future.
We've heard from the Australian pastors. It's time to hear from some of our Canadian pastors. The first is the Reverend Dr. Thomas Korcok, who serves as professor at Concordia Lutheran Theological Seminary in St. Catharines, and he has been a professor there since 2021. He studied at CLTS and was ordained in 1987. He is the author of Serpents in the Classroom, The Poisoning of Modern Education and How the Church Can Cure It, which was published by 1517. And he has also written Lutheran Education, From Wittenberg to the Future, which was published by Concordia Publishing House. He is married to Doreen and they have 2 adult children. I had the pleasure of interviewing Pastor Korcok myself early one morning. And Dr. Korcok, thank you so much for being willing to participate in this episode. When did you first feel the inner call to the office of the ministry? Was being a pastor your first choice, or did you want to pursue a different career path?
I've been asked that question before, and that's a really hard one to answer. I grew up as a pastor's kid. I grew up in a Lutheran home. My father was a very active and very devout Lutheran minister. And from little on, I always wanted to be a Lutheran minister. In fact, my mother kept a thing that I did in grade 1 for school. And every child was supposed to write what they want to be when they grow up. And what did I write? I wrote, I want to be a Lutheran minister. I want to go to the office and study the Bible and tell people about God. I made a few spelling errors back in grade 1. That was just always what I wanted to do. So it's kind of hard because people say, oh, did you have some experience? Did something happen to you? And no, it's just always what I wanted to be. When I got a little bit older, when I was, I guess, lower teens or that sort of stuff, I wanted to be a veterinarian for a while, and I wanted to be a civil engineer for a while. And each one of those, my grades just weren't good enough. I sucked at math, which means I couldn't be an engineer. You wouldn't want me as an engineer, and I wouldn't have had the science marks to get into veterinary school. So those doors just kept closing. For a while, I worked for the historic park system in Canada. I had summer jobs, and I wanted to work for Parks Canada, and that just didn't work out. So each door kept closing, and finally my father said, this is what you've always wanted to do, so why don't you just do it? And I went away to Concordia College in Ann Arbor. They had a very robust pre-seminary program. And it's like, yeah, I guess that's what I should do. And it sounds so uninspiring, but I think that's the way God works in people's lives. He doesn't always work in big thunderclaps or life-revealing moments. Sometimes it's just like, well, there's the door. It's open. That's the one you should take. I still want to do other things in my life. Man, I want to be everything from a truck driver to a grader operator to a carpenter. And, I'm just naturally curious and I have fun at all sorts of stuff. But hey, it's where God has placed me. So I guess that's what I'm going to be. And it's just been confirmed externally with call documents where, sometimes I would think maybe I should be something else. And it's like, no, here's my call. I'm a pastor. And also just by the affirmation from folks around me that say, no, you're good at that job. That's what you're supposed to be doing. Later on, I kept thinking, maybe this is not what I should be doing at all. And especially you're going through some difficult times. And for a while, I was in a congregation, it was booming and people were coming and we had new converts and adult baptisms and a Sunday school of 40 and 50 children. And, it's easy to be a pastor in that situation. Tiring, but easy. But then when that stops and all of a sudden people start grumbling and you have adversity and difficulties, then you think, maybe I shouldn't be here at all. And that's the time when, for me as a pastor, that external call, that piece of paper that I can point to and say, God worked through his people to extend his call to me at this time. That's what he wants me to do, and this is where he wants me to be. Now, I said I've never really had much of an inner call or that, and I think it's important to distinguish. There is, the desire to be a pastor, just like there is a desire to be a farmer, a desire to be an architect, a desire to be a shopkeeper. And I think that's common to all vocations. But then there is the divine call, which is different. And that's where God works through his people to extend a call to serve and to proclaim the gospel. At my first call in the first parish, it was a wonderful little parish. Everything was going good. We had a wonderful little house, loved it. Both my wife and I were just happy as bugs. And I remember we put on a back deck on our house, and there was one board I never put up. And I said to my wife, the day I put that up is the day I'm going to get a call. And so one year I put it up, and there was a congregation that had been vacant. It was quite a ways away from us. It was 4 or 5 hours away. It had been a difficult situation. As soon as they were vacant, I thought, I just put that board up, and I know that they are going to call me. And it was so bad. And I wanted to avoid it so much that I didn't go into the office the next day after their call meeting, figuring if I stay away from a telephone, God's not going to know where I am. And they didn't call me. They called someone else. That was great. The person they called turned it down. Second call meeting, again, I knew that they were having a call meeting. Again, I avoided everything. I avoided the telephone. I avoided going into my office. They called someone else. Okay. Third call meeting, I knew about it. I still did the same thing, avoided it. They didn't call me. Great. Fourth call meeting, I didn't know about it. I forgot. And I'm at the church. It was at 8:30 at night. The phone rings. I pick it up. And before he got that far, he said, "This is Jim from Grace." I said, "I know why you're calling." And my heart just sank. It absolutely sank because I did not want to leave. My wife did not want to leave. And yet we left and we followed God's call. It was an experience and it was a good experience and God blessed us. But sometimes God does work like that. How, I don't know. I just absolutely knew that I was going to get called to that congregation for some strange reason. Another time, I had been serving in the Canadian military for some time. As a reserve officer, I would take contracts, and it was pretty good. I enjoyed chaplain work, and the conditions of working with the military, I thoroughly enjoyed that. And I had resolved that, okay, I'm done with parish work. I'm done with being a formal pastor. I'm just going to be a chaplain for the rest of my career. And once again, never say stuff like that. I'm so stupid because as soon as you say that, God teaches you a lesson. So I was talking to my wife. I was stationed in Victoria, BC, sailing with the Navy. That's on the west coast of Canada. I was talking to my wife on the phone. She was back here in Niagara. And I said, "That's it. I'm done. I'm just going to do chaplaincy work." And 1 week later, I got a phone call from Concordia University, Chicago, from their theology faculty. They say, "We want to call you as a theology professor." And I hung up the phone. I went, crap, because I knew God had changed my plans yet again. God does not always work according to our plans, is what I learned, because I didn't want to go to Concordia, Chicago. I did not want to teach. I did not want to teach at a seminary. I did not want to teach at a university. I did not want to be an educator in any way, shape, or form. And the only reason I went down there for a visit was because my wife said it's a free trip to Chicago and you've never been there. So it's like, I'm so cheap, I can't pass up a free flight to Chicago. So I went and I got there and I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, yeah, this is where God wants me to be now. And so they extended a call and I accepted and I taught there. You know, how does God work? In very weird ways, at least weird to us. And even when I came to the seminary, I shouldn't say this because someone from the seminary might be listening, but I had vowed never to return to the seminary. Like that was the last place I would ever end up. And yet COVID hit. I was stuck at home and we had a house close to the seminary. They asked me to fill in, and this thing I had vowed never to do, I'm now doing. So it's never something I aspired to. Like I thought, this is really the place I want to go. And I think anyone who thinks that, probably that's an automatic red flag. That's a huge red flag. This is something that I want to do. In each and every case, it's always been something that I really don't want to do. God drags me kicking and screaming into it, and I do it to the best of my abilities. And I'm sure there are people, I know there are people who could do a much better job than me. They're smarter, they're brighter, they're more theologically adept, they're crackerjack theologians. But, you know, I have the job and they don't. So I guess that's the way it is.
For you, it was God had simply just placed good work for you to do in front of you. The Bible talks about good works, that God has prepared good works for us.
And I guess that's kind of like that in every vocation, right? When you're a parent, when you're a mother or father, man, there's an awful lot of stuff you don't want to do. Really. When you were a teenager, you didn't wake up and saying, wow, I want to be awake at 3 o'clock in the morning with a screaming baby and changing poopy diapers. And yet God gives you this vocation, God gives you this calling, and he places a screaming baby with a poopy diaper in front of you and say, here, now work on it. And you do it, and you do it thankfully, and you do it gladly, and you rejoice, and you give thanks for it. You may not give thanks for the smelly part of it, but you give thanks that this is the work that God prepared for you to do. And so you do it. And I think that's where the joy of Christian service comes in, no matter what vocation you have. It's here, I was given a job, I'm doing it, not because I want to or have a deep burning desire to do it, but because that's what needs to be done.
I struggled a little bit pulling together the questions for these interviews simply because the way that I had heard pastors talk about how they became pastors, I had never heard one say, oh, it was my dream to be a pastor. And so I just pursued that dream.
Unlike an evangelical or Pentecostal who will always point to this inner call and this inner burning desire to be a pastor, I'm a firm believer that God works through people. And the sure sign that this is what one should be is by listening to God's people. And if you have other people saying, you should be a pastor, you should be a deaconess, you should be a Lutheran school teacher, well, okay, maybe that's the way God works, right? And maybe you should listen to God's people. God works through people, right? And as I go and visit congregations and I represent the seminary and I see young men and young women, I'll tell them, I'll say, has anyone told you that you should consider becoming a deaconess or becoming a pastor? And often they'll say, well, actually, yeah. I said, listen to that. There's a reason for that.
What was the journey like for you going through seminary to become a pastor? Was it full of challenges? Was it difficult once you had made that decision to go to seminary?
No, because it's just what I was supposed to be doing. I'm kind of dopey. It's like, okay, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. I guess I'll go do it. I was put on a path and it's like, well, okay, I guess this is what I should do next. My father said, well, you want to become a pastor, you go to Concordia College and go to the pre-sem. Okay, never visited. I just packed up the car and I went. And then I showed up at the seminary. And now, mind you, so he was one of the founders of Concordia Lutheran Theological Seminary in St. Catherine's. And he taught adjunct there. He taught pastoral practice and homiletic sermon preparation. So I lived at home and I got a double seminary education because when I came home, would talk about what I learned in class. So that was a real blessing. It was like, pass the courses. What do I have to do to pass and be a pastor? And I know professors afterwards who kind of couldn't believe that I went and got a doctorate and ended up teaching. I was not the golden child of the seminary, that's for sure. I was an adequate student.
Okay. With getting your doctorate, was it
Right.
another good work that God placed in front of you and you're like, okay, I'm going to do it?
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Yeah, that's kind of the same thing, Alexi. I had vowed never to go back to school. I remember being in the parish and someone said, hey, have you ever considered teaching, getting an advanced degree? And I just would laugh at their face. No way. I love being in the pulpit. I love preaching. I love teaching God's people. And we had started a school. I was exhausted. It's an exhausting thing. I needed time off. And I thought, well, it may as well be useful. Don't just waste time. So I went back to school. I got a MPhil from University of Glasgow. And then while I was there, my advisor was going back to the Free University of Amsterdam. And she said, well, why don't you continue with a doctorate? I went, oh, okay. Right. So I continued with a doctorate and I got that done. Then someone says, hey, you should write a book. If you know me, I'm a terrible writer. Okay, I'll write a book. Someone is saying you should do it. Okay. And I do it. There are other people who could do a way better job. That's a frustrating thing. But, it's what I do. Now, having said that, where God places you, I think when you look at where God places you and why he does that, it's for other people. And so often working with students, I'd have students who are struggling and just, they work hard and learning and academics didn't come easy to them. And I could sit there and say, hey, I know exactly what you're talking about. I suck at academics. And their eyes would just like a professor telling me that academics is hard. What? Because usually academics, professors, they're brainiacs, right? They can read a book in their sleep. And I think maybe part of what I bring is the ability to say, hey, I get it. Learning is hard sometimes. And it's not easy and it's not always pleasant, but just keep at it. So, maybe that's why God places me here. I don't know.
Now we will move on to Pastor Jason Gillard. Pastor Jason is from Ontario in Canada, and he serves at Christ Our Saviour Lutheran Church in Grimsby and Redeemer Evangelical Lutheran Church in Hamilton. He studied at Concordia Lutheran Theological Seminary in St. Catharines, and he was ordained in 2023. He is married to Camille, and they have 2 children. And he has recently started up a Substack called We Still Believe with another pastor named Pastor David Zakel. They started up this Substack with a desire to teach confessional biblical theology for those seeking truth in the Canadian context. Pastor Jason, thank you for being a part of today's episode. When did you first have the desire to become a pastor? And was being a pastor your first choice, or did you want to pursue a different career path?
I first had the desire. It was actually before I got confirmed officially. I was confirmed later than I guess the typical age. I was confirmed at the end of high school. And it was at that stage in life where everyone's trying to make you answer the question as a kid of what are you going to do for the rest of your life? And there I was in that situation. And that was when I first had the thought of becoming a pastor. That was when I was entering Lutheranism, you could say, for lack of a better word. And so that's when I was interested in the idea of becoming a pastor and started to look into it. Well, then being confirmed by the end of my high school and then deciding to go on to study for my undergrad, which was already lined up in my mind to go towards seminary. Seminary not having a requirement on a specific bachelor degree I had to have, but instead just something. Me and my father went and met with the seminary professors to discuss what would a good bachelor degree be to have to go into seminary. So in that sense, when did I first feel that call? It was early on. Was there much time then to pursue something else? Unlike second career guys, I didn't pursue anything else seriously. But I remember I did, before I thought of becoming a pastor, I had thoughts of going into a military-based career. And reflecting on that more, I don't think I saw it at the time, but it's interesting kind of seeing the connections between that and being a pastor, because they can seem rather different. But you have these kind of the things that enticed me, let's put it that way, were the idea of service to others, the camaraderie, the duty, and the things that, setting out in a self-sacrificial way to serve others. Both military and being a pastor have that. And I've come to understand that even more, having been a pastor now for a couple of years. I think that's kind of shows the tie between the two and how then going down this way, becoming a pastor, ended up being the right thing for me.
Did you wrestle with the idea of becoming a pastor? And if so, what thoughts and challenges did you wrestle with?
At the time, wouldn't say I wrestled with the idea. And I wonder now, because if anything, there's been more wrestling in the this is the way I've chosen, right? This is the way I'm going. I'm a pastor now, right? There's a lot to wrestle with being a pastor. But back then there wasn't much wrestling. And I wonder, I've had the thought, right? Was I just naive? Was I kind of clueless what I was getting into, right? Not knowing any pastors like in my family or close or anything like that. The ministry seemed like something that I could fit into. Again, was that just naivety? I don't know. But maybe in some ways I look back thinking, was that a blessing? That as a young person, I wasn't overthinking it. I couldn't overthink it. Society pushes you into this huge decision of what are you going to do for the rest of your life? And there I was picking something, making a firm decision. Yeah, not wavering, not wrestling with it too much, because I chose and I set out on that path. Being young, I didn't have any dependents I had to worry about. The seminary, it was close to my hometown, so I was able to live at home. So I didn't even have to worry about like moving out and such. I had support of family for all of that, all throughout my bachelor degree and through seminary. I had the support of my family. Since I was in a position where there wasn't many major obstacles, I lived at home, I had the support of family, didn't have to worry about the many things that my fellow seminarians had to worry about, like food and housing and so forth. Since I was in that position, blessed to be in that position, I was able to go at it head on, which didn't mean seminary didn't have any obstacles for me. Because if anything, it just removed some of the, let's say, the immediate obstacles in the way, allowing me to then tackle and wrestle with the natural obstacles that come with being in seminary. So things like the academic rigor and then the academic training. And then you get into the practical with field work and vicarage. Because God was gracious to me in setting me up in the position I was to be able to attend seminary, those other things could then be my focus. And that helped me greatly. When people have asked me, ever since I was in seminary and then entered the ministry, right? That question of every pastor gets asked it. Why did you become a minister? Or why do you want to become a minister? I've always never had a real answer that actually satisfies the people asking that question. A lot of people, they can pinpoint down to like a specific moment when they made the decision. As with some of the questions you're asking me, right? The thought of like, oh, when did you feel it with the inner call, which is a right way to think about it, right? Because the external call comes later, but how does the inner call work? And in a way, I never had a moment where I felt an inner call, let's say directly, right? I looked at the pastor I had at the time and I saw what he was doing. I thought, that's something that seems like I could do. That relates to me wondering, okay, I was young, I was naive and with many things, just being young, right? But that's just how my brain worked with a lot of things, of being more practical, less driven by what I felt versus what I thought I could practically do, how I thought I could practically contribute in whatever career I was going to end up being in that time. And so my decision was really, I thought this was something that I had some leanings towards, that of course I would need the hefty training that comes with seminary to build me up into what it needs to be. But I felt like I had some sort of building blocks that served itself to becoming a pastor. Having become a pastor now, I do see how some of those things, let's say I was right in. God blessed me with certain things, has blessed me, continues to bless me with many things that I think are a great help to being a pastor. The time in seminary serves as a good time to not just build up, but also strip down the things that get in the way. And so with all the reflection I have looking back, having that practical mindset to why did I want to become a pastor? I thought, I'd be okay at it maybe, right? And church needs pastors. It's something that seminary has, thankfully, taken that and turned it into what it needs to be. It wasn't something self-formed, right? It's something that the seminary formed me into. And I know my professors can speak to just how I was at the beginning of seminary. When I took my first class, when I was still in my undergrad, took Greek, and I was still a teenager at the time, to when I was done. And, just before my last year, I ended up being married. And then just after graduating, within half a year, we had our first kid. And so life had changed a lot from when I first encountered the seminary, being a teenager, to coming out of it with a wife and then soon a kid. And is a level of maturing there, of course, that comes. And therefore, now when I get that question of why did I become a pastor, I think I still resort back to kind of the practical mindset, right? I don't have a moment to point to. One of the draws for me with Lutheranism was the basis on objective truth and the moving away from subjective feelings. And so maybe that tainted me away from even searching for any kind of inner call. But nevertheless, when I look back now and think about it, I see how I was looking for a way of how to serve in a sacrificial way, that things that I previously looked into, like the military, but it was me desiring to do the same thing, to serve others. And I thank God that he directed me towards the ministry, because that can be done in a much greater way than anything could be done with the military. Of course, it's different ways it's done, but the ability of being able to be a part of people's lives, right? Sometimes it's described as, walking with people, walking with them as they go through their Christian life. I'm thankful every day that I'm able to do that with people as their pastor, because that's something that, sure, at one point I thought, I'd be good for this, but I see instead now how it's, God is able to work through me for this purpose. And I think I'm thankful to him that he can do that. And that looking back, I was young and didn't think it too much, didn't wrestle with the idea, but that in itself has led me to be in this position where God can use me as he wills.
Our last pastor in today's episode is Pastor Guntars Baikovs. Many of our Australian listeners will know who he is because he lived and served here in Australia for many years. He now serves at Grace Lutheran Church in Oshawa, Canada, and he moved from Australia to Canada in 2025. He studied at Luther's Academy in Riga, Latvia, and Concordia Seminary in St. Louis. He was ordained in 2007. He also runs Wittenberg Academy, which is an online platform that offers courses on biblical wisdom. He is also the spiritual advisor for Here She Stands. He is married to Jana, and they have 5 children and 8 grandchildren. Pastor Guntars recorded his answers at home and sent them in to us. Thank you, Pastor Guntars, for your encouraging words. God bless.
Thank you. Thank you. Here She Stands for inviting me to this conversation. So the first question, when did you first have the desire to the office of the ministry? Was being a pastor your first choice, or did you want to pursue a different career path? Not my first choice, and I would add not my choice at all. I guess in my case the answer must be kind of provided in two parts. The Lord's intervention came in 2 waves in my life, and it took some time for him to get me at least somewhere where he wanted me to be. So the first wave was in my late teens. During the last year of high school, I had no idea where to go and what to do. Our school psychologist suggested to study psychology and education. That's where I went, and that was roughly around the time when I met first Christians. And it was a time of revival in former Soviet Union. Soviet Empire was collapsing, and interestingly enough, I think the church was getting kind of popular. And coming from non-Christian background with a very, very different worldly values, I found Christianity just amazing, so attractive, so pure, so good, so noble, and even reflecting back, if we mostly probably heard the law. it still seems so beautiful, so satisfying to follow it and to feel good about yourself, to feel good about you doing good and you being such a great human being. And during the time, there were a few pastors who were quite well known nationwide, speaking on TV and speaking on radio, and very impressive, very attractive, very smart, very eloquent, by most people well regarded. So basically, very much liked by the nation. I guess that was probably then when I thought that, yeah, it would be lovely, sort of to be a pastor, teaching others with authority and knowing all the answers and being in this respected position and dealing with interesting topics, God and life and death and right and wrong. As you can see, all the wrong reasons for even thinking about the calling of pastors. And the good Lord probably was looking and, oh boy, he has no idea what the ministry is about. And worse, he has no idea of who he is and what he is capable of, and just living in illusions, as we all do. So I guess he thought, I'll give him some 10 years of freedom to follow his heart and to live the life he chooses, and then we will revisit this and we'll talk again. So that's what happened. After a couple of years, I did fall away from faith, and just as Jesus told in that story in Matthew 12, when the evil spirit leaves and then wanders around and then comes back and finds, oh, this is a lovely, orderly place. And then he takes 7 others with him, and then it gets so much worse with that person. So that was my experience. I guess I had to experience the power of sin in my life, the power of my sin in various ways, and just to know that biblical verdict is indeed correct. There is nothing good in me. Tensions of my heart are evil from my youth. And those were valuable lessons. They were painful for me at times, and certainly painful for others involved, and painful for our oldest children. In a way, thanks to the faithfulness and protection of the Lord that I am still here in one piece, and we are having this interview today. It's kind of against all the odds. And then when the Lord thought that I have fallen low enough, he knocked at our door again. He kind of knocked on our head. We certainly felt that knocking. A series of events that shook our entire lives, completely out of our control, completely contrary to what we would naturally expect. Dark period in life where everything just goes wrong, and including losing our first child, including Jana barely surviving all the complications, and that's how the second wave of God's invasion began in our life. I guess we are such a stiff-necked people that the Lord needs to use sufferings just to get our attention. At least that was the case with me, and that means that when something out of ordinary happens in our lives, we should not rush to pray to just quickly take it away. I guess we need to ask those questions. Good Lord, what is this about? What do you want us to hear? How do you want to bless us? What are you freeing us from? And if we ask those questions, then answers may surprise us. Now, you asked, when did you first have the desire to the office of the ministry? I don't think that is the most helpful language to speak about the office of the holy ministry as a career path. It is a unique calling to serve with the holy things, with the means of the Holy Spirit, the means of grace. When we consider a career, we consider where and how to apply our God-given gifts and talents, and when it comes to the office of the holy ministry, the Lord considers whom he wants to use, where and how. And I sometimes wonder about the criteria he uses. Only he knows what he is doing. And yeah, therefore I'm quite suspicious when someone speaks about how they would like to be a pastor. Really? Really? So what do you mean by that? How do you understand that? Have you seen a pastor doing some pastor stuff, preaching, leading the service, teaching, counseling, caring, and then you think of, I want to be a pastor? Not sure. It seems to be a very, very superficial understanding, and unfortunately, I've met fellow students during my many seminary years who might have come with similar ideas. Yeah, I want to be a pastor. And some were looking forward to the day when they will finally get out of seminary and will be able to get rid of all their books and all the studies leave behind and get to do the real pastor stuff, whatever that means. Not sure about that. But in my case, with the Lord invading my life again, the second wave offense of the General of Hosts, I still probably didn't want to become a pastor. And many of my now pastor friends didn't want to become pastors either. First came something else. Hunger and thirst. Hunger and thirst for the Word of God. We were captivated by the Word, by the beauty of God's story, by the beauty and goodness of Jesus. We wanted to learn more about Him. We wanted to sit at His feet and just listen, take in, discover the truth about God, about ourselves, about this world, and to learn the wisdom of this God and so on. That was the best part, dwelling in the Word, engaging with the Lord, allowing Him to transform us through His servants, professors and teachers. And sure, after a while, when you're so full of God's good stuff, God's good things, God's good gifts, you can't help you want to share them with others, and you want everyone to be amazed by God's goodness and in all of His undeserved grace, and you want to convert the entire world so that they all are overjoyed because of this, because of God's promises, and regardless of what this life may throw at us at any given moment. And in a way, I suspect to serve as a pastor will, with all the many expectations that there are these days, it's kind of a price that you pay. Price that you pay for that incredible gift to be able to spend so much time in Lord's presence, marveling about His revelation. It is a blessed calling. The question is, did you wrestle with the idea of becoming a pastor? During that first Christian experience, not much. But during the time of that second chance, yes, oh yes. I was blessed to be able to have regular meetings with my pastor, with Reverend Alexander Bitte. And he would provide his very competent answers to all my questions, and he would give me new books to read, and then we would discuss them. It was just great time. And then one day, as we were conversing, he almost casually asked me, "Would you like to go to the seminary? That way you could learn more." That was one of those moments, terrifying and beautiful at the same time. And it was very unexpected. It was, in a sense, shocking. In a sense, it was frightening. And we with Diana, we somehow immediately saw that moment for what it was. Not just, would you like to study a little bit out of curiosity? We understood that to be a call to serve, involving everything that would follow those studies. We understood it was not just an invitation from our pastor, but as a call from the Lord of the Church, God Himself speaking to us, calling us. and I mean us, I say us like a plural. I mean us, for when such a call comes, it is both husband and wife who are in that boat. It's so good if they both are on the same page. And that is an incredible blessing, and one for which I'm so grateful. So yes, it was frightening, and we didn't want to say yes, but we were afraid to say no. So we were kind of stuck what to do, what to say, and it took a long time to come back with our answer, and luckily we're such a clever people. So we came up with this great clever solution. So we said yes, but not now. And the reason being, Jan was pregnant, contrary to what the doctors have told us before, and who can study with a little baby at home, right? So that was our excuse. I imagine that the Lord and all his angels were just probably laughing aloud. He knew what he would do. Okay, you cannot study with a baby, right? By the time I graduated seminary in Latvia, he had blessed us with 2 more babies, with two more sons, and the whole study time was this life season full of babies everywhere. The Lord knows better, and you see, this is true. He doesn't shape us with easy times. He shapes us, putting us under different pressures until we begin to take that shape that he wants us to have. And that is why when I hear about difficulties that different seminary students and their families are going through, I thank God. I thank God. It means that he is serious about them, that he wants to extract the most from them, to make them as good tools for his ministry as possible, good things. So rejoice if that is your situation, rejoice. For the Lord is at work with you, he certainly is. If you wrestle with the idea of becoming a pastor, what thoughts and challenges did you wrestle with? No, as I mentioned, there was a mix of feelings. On the one hand, that was such an honor to be even invited to study in seminary. And when 10 years earlier, I sort of desired to be at least somehow involved in the church's ministry, no, then I thought about myself as a decent person, quite likable, many good qualities, one of those good people out there. And then fast forward 10 years, and if not everything, then so much had changed. One look at first letter to Timothy, chapter 3, and it's quite easy to see why I would fear and what issues I would wrestle with. If someone desires that office of overseer, office of a pastor, he must be above reproach, not me. I had spent most of that decade working in the gaming industry and mostly in management, and it came with a certain kind of lifestyle. Husband of one wife, not me. I was divorced and then I was remarried. Sober-minded, self-controlled, not drunkard. Not me. Well thought by the outsiders so that he may not fall in the snare of the devil, not me. And that may explain why. Yeah, we've been thinking. Maybe that is an explanation why the Lord took us away from Latvia and took us so far away from Latvia. So I don't know what my pastor was thinking and what the good Lord was thinking. On top of that, also I had this first experience with the church, which ended with falling away. So what did I fear? What I wrestled with? What if I fall away again? What if I let everyone down, everyone who has trusted me? And besides those pastoral responsibilities, they are somewhat scary. Pastors are dealing with the matters of life and death and eternal life and death. So what if I am too weak to be faithful? Then sure, now Now I know that I am too weak. But thanks be to God that the office is not about my strengths. It's not about me. It is the triune God who acts through his imperfect people. What if I don't know what to say? 20 years later, still often I don't know what to say. I don't know. What if I cannot answer all the questions I'm asked? That was another worry. And now, after many years of diligent study, here it is. I still do struggle. What if I cannot discern when to speak the law and when the gospel? When to be strict and demanding and when to be gracious? What if I get those wrong? What will happen? So I worry, still worry. When I had my 4th installation service here in Canada, I was again scared to death. Good Lord, what are you doing? Are you sure about this? Because I'm not. And I guess this is how Jesus deals with me. That is how he motivates me. Take, for example, this interview. I couldn't just sit down and freely answer whatever comes to my mind. And so this is all scripted. I was praying, I was considering who will be listening, what may be helpful for them, what to say, what to leave outside. How could this interview be blessing for others? And it's similar before every service, before every Bible study, before every visit, before every confession. And I'm sure that the Lord could take all that wrestling, all that fear away just in an instant, and if He wanted. But obviously that, in my case, that serves His purposes, so let it be so. Yeah, sure, as time went, gracious Father kept teaching me that this office of the holy ministry is not me doing this ministry. The burden is not on me. The burden is not on pastors. The outcomes do not depend on pastors. It is His ministry. He is the one who speaks. He is the one who creates faith. He is the one who sustains faith, and He is the one who gives different things or withholds, the one who opens, and then He is the one who shuts. But importantly, He is the one who is always faithful to us, always faithful to His promises, and whatever happens, always near to us. And we pastors, we need to remember, we too are His children. Whatever imperfect, still loved more than we know. Each one coming with their own strange life stories from the strangest of places, and all privileged to participate in His work with eternal significance. And sure, yes, He uses us. He speaks and acts through us, but mostly He channels His gift through us, and then spends so much time supplying what was missing in our imperfect efforts, fixing what we messed up, while gently caring for His people. Anyhow, that's my story. Those are my brief answers to your questions, and sure it will be different for everyone else. And I just pray that may the good Lord use this to bless you as only He can. May He bless you.
Thank you for listening to this special episode. Let us know if you enjoyed this format and if you would like more of these sorts of interviews in the future. Thank you for listening. If you would like to keep the conversation going or are seeking further encouragement, please visit our website and our new blog at hereshestands.online. Here She Stands is an Australian podcast for Lutheran women, and we release new episodes every 3 weeks on a Tuesday. You can find us on all major podcasting platforms as well as YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram. If you would like to contact us directly, our email address is hereshestands.podcast podcast@gmail.com. Until next time, we pray that you will hold fast to God's word and confidently stand and say, "Here I stand, I can do no other."